And I want to give this personal testimony of what I believe was the turning point of my life. It was one day the very firm, strong conviction came that I was not seeing what I believed God was capable of doing.
The thing that attracted me about the Navigators was that they were thinking globally. That came from the early days when Dawson Trotman in 1931 got out and prayed with a map of the United States and then a map of the world.
The suggestion came, well, let's get a map of the world. That ought to make a good prayer list.
Praying over all these cities and states.
Praying that God would raise up men and women in those places.
And then it went from that to the world.
And we put our finger in China and on Japan and on the Philippine Islands, and we pray for them by name.
Putting his finger in all these places in the world, including Kenya, praying that God would use him and the people around him to advance the kingdom.
And we said, God, allow us to serve you and to reach men for you in every continent of the world.
And it was very challenging to think of a person praying for the whole world and thinking you could do something about it.
There was a period of tremendous sending in the 60s and 70s. We were sending at a 50% rate, which was absolutely phenomenal.
We didn't have a job description. They didn't even tell us what city to go to.
We didn't even have a missions department. I mean, we went out with nothing.
If you raised your hand and said, I want to go, it was a big world out there. Where would you like to go?
I felt everywhere I turned in the Navigators, there was an emphasis on the nations and our part in helping fulfill the Great Commission. What I think most impacted me were the examples, the models of my campus directors.
We would gather students together around world maps, putting our fingers on nations of the world. And that was riveting, that kind of passion.
We frequently talked about going overseas. Often they would bring a missionary and we would all sit around and eat dinner with them and find out what it was like to live overseas.
And I still remember some of their stories and the people. And it seemed like the common question among us was, what country are you praying about going to?
In some ways, I know that I'm a direct answer to the prayer of Dawson Trotman. Towards the end of my high school career, the Navigator started to work with high schoolers. I ended up being among those that the high school ministry contacted.
I started going to these Navigator Bible studies, and initially I was checking them out. And then eventually God, kept taking me deeper and deeper.
A lot of the work around Asia was started by American missionaries. It was such a sacrifice for them to come all the way from the States to live amongst the Asians. And I think the very fact that they did that speaks volumes.
They get into your life as you open it up, because they open up their lives to you.
The Lord used the Navigators to put a vision in my heart for generations in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I remember thinking, if God uses me to help one of these fellow students in such a way that they are able to disciple somebody else, this chain reaction will not stop.
Lon Sani took us on a walk up to the gravesite of Dawson Trotman to realize that God was and is and will continue to fulfill His promises to reach the nations. Here we were, probably from 7, 8, 9 Asian countries, because someone prayed, someone believed God.
I don't know what Dawson saw, but he believed. And I believe God is looking for the same people who will believe what He has said and step forth in faith.
We learned a lot of hard lessons in the 70s. Many people went out not really having been prepared. Many of those people came back discouraged.
We began to really struggle, having, some would say, oversent from the U.S.
If you send everybody away, you will not replenish what you're doing right here.
I think of Isaiah 49:6. It's both and, not either or. And there's a temptation to think either or about the nations. It's either we would focus on local ministry or give ourselves to thinking about global ministry, but I think that's wrong thinking. Just like we give ourselves to having a solid local mission strategy, we also need, each of us, every navigator, to have a solid global mission strategy. So we need both and, the bifocal vision.
They have to see what they are doing on their campus is directly connected with what's on God's heart to reach the nations.
Beginning Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the utmost parts of the earth. We are not to stop with our own people. We are to go to the utmost.
God's had this on his heart all along. We just need to figure out how to give greater room for that to be expressed.
That involves believers coming together and agreeing this is the picture, this is the direction that we're headed. And I feel like it's going to take all hands on deck. Leaders are going to have to do their part. Senders are going to have to do their part. I think if we can keep pressing toward the focal point that this gospel will be preached in all the nations.
I don't think God is frustrated by the fact that there are few laborers. He's just stating an obvious fact. There were few laborers in the day of Jesus. There are few laborers today. There will be few laborers when Jesus returns. That verse is still going to be true. And the reason it's going to be true is not many people want to pay the price to labor. It costs you to labor.
I think Jesus made that very clear to us, that this isn't about us. This is about him and his heart and the heart of our Father, that he so loves the world that he would send us as his hands and feet.
The nations are waiting for Jesus. The nations are needing to hear this message. Might you be one of those today who is needing to hear the Lord, asking, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Would you be willing to say, here I am, Lord, send me?